Good evening, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation number 56. We've been doing this for quite a while now. Before we move on to our musical opening, as we always do, I just want to mention something about the thumbnail, because I know someone's going to ask me otherwise. The thumbnail is the Royal Marine Light Infantry at the Battle of Tel El Kabir in Egypt in 1882, and it was just after they'd stormed the Egyptian entrenchment. And you'll notice they're wearing blue tunics, and that is because the Royal Marine Light Infantry, although they wore red tunics for full dress in those days, whereas the Royal Marine Artillery wore blue, their undress tunics, the ones that they wore for working and fighting in, were blue. So that's why they're blue. And with that, I'm going to start us off with a tune, as I always do.
You've heard about the Indians with the tomahawks and spears, and of the Huron warriors, the heroes of recent years. And also I might mention the British Grenadiers. None of them were in it like the Double of Fusiliers. You've heard about the Light Brigade and of the deeds they've done, and of the other regiments, the many a victory is won. But the pride of all the army, the Dragoons and Cavaliers, with a noble band of warriors. Double and Fusiliers with your left foot right above face. This is the way we go, charging with the bayonets, the terror of every foe. The glory to Old Ireland, as proud as buccaneers, and the terror to creation are Double and Fusiliers. Well, you've heard about the wars between the Russians and the Brits. The Tsar one day was reading an old copy of the Fitz. And when the general came to him and threw himself down in tears, we better run back like racers, here's the Double and Fusiliers. The Tsar commenced to tremble and he bit his under lip. They got a boy, says he, I think we better take the tip. The devils come from Ireland, and to judge from what I hear, the demons are militiamen. The Double and Fusiliers with your left foot right above face. This is the way we go, charging with the bayonets, the terror of every foe. The glory to Old Ireland, the proud of buccaneers, and the terror to creation are the Double and Fusiliers. Well, the sergeant cried, "Get ready, lads, lay down its sword and gun. Take off your shoes and stockings, boys, and when I tell you's run." We didn't stop, but started, and with the ringing cheers came a shower of bricks and bullets from the Double and Fusiliers. The time when Julius Caesar tried to land down at King's End, the Coast Guard's given Scotland's up on the Double and stayed the sun. And yesterday we're landing, lads, we heard the ringing cheers. Get back to wrong like razors' tears. The Double and Fusiliers with your left foot right above face. This is the way we go, charging with the bayonets, the terror of every foe. The glory to Old Ireland, as proud as buccaneers, and the terror to creation are the Double and Fusiliers with your left foot right above face. This is the way we go, charging with the bayonets, the terror of every foe. The glory to Old Ireland, as proud as buccaneers, and the terror to creation are the Double and Fusiliers.
Okay, and that was the Double and Fusiliers, which is a traditional song about one of the old British Army regiments from Ireland. And that was for a mate of mine on Discord, who knows who he is. So how are we going this evening, gentlemen?
Yeah, good.
Good. Much as I was.
Cool. All right, well, I'll go around. I think we'll do anti-clockwise this week, and I'll start off with John. Anything you wanted to bring up as a starter subject?
I'm sure you start off with me every time I come on, but honestly,
I can go the other way and leave you to
no.
last
Well,
if you...
part of the reason I came on this week is, as I was explaining before the stream, basically for the last 2 weeks, I haven't looked at anything. I've been so busy with work and,
Fair enough.
just not wanting to get into any of the other stuff when you've done like a 10, 12-hour work day. And yeah, honestly, I came on because I want to hear what's been going on in the world.
No worries at all. No worries at all. George.
There's not been too much I've been really paying attention to, because it's been quite a busy week for me. I definitely not nearly as busy as John because I'm a student, but still. Is there anything to add? I do have a sort of less news-related topic and more of a sort of question.
Go on then.
And our overlords, do we think that they are malevolent, ambivalent, or they genuinely think they're being benevolent? Because I am still of the personal belief that they believe to themselves to be benevolent, and I'm just interested to hear what the panel has to say on that.
Well, I'll give you a short and sweet answer. I think it's somewhere between the latter two myself. So I think they think they're benevolent to some degree, but I also think they're malevolent and kind of know it.
Benevolence is quite an interesting one, isn't it? Because it really reflects the the kind of morals and of society and religion. And I think benevolence in the past used to be in the Christian sense, but given that they seem to be worshipping the planet and various other things, benevolence to them probably looks quite a lot like malevolence to us, I would say.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think but the basic answer is they think that they're being benevolent. It's the sort of thing I would gauge as the answer to that.
Yes, I think they probably do genuinely believe that they need to save the world, and saving the world means getting rid of people. And so, like I say, to us, it looks rather malevolent.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much what I think, to be honest. Yeah. Well, Adamant and Napoleon. I'm just going to call you Napoleon because I'm not going to say Le Garde Miette Pas.
I mean, we've talked on this stream before about. I think you, George, specifically have talked about how they have a certain when like the boomercons talk about like the lefties being like the new Christians because they have this sort of religious zeal to them. To them it's definitely benevolence, but they also, I don't know, they take it to a point where it's almost like an extreme form of narcissism, and then anything that's a front to that they sort of hold in extreme spite.
Yeah. I mean, going towards what Mitch has just put in the chat, I mean, they might literally believe in the greater good, to quote that movie, Hot Fuzz, I believe it was, yeah. So, like, they might see that, like, a few glasses will be broken on the way to laying the table, or something like that. But
well, they literally wrap this stuff up in lies, don't they? Like, I mean, I don't know if any of you saw that debate between Destiny and Mark Collette.
I haven't actually.
It's I was going into it prepared to cringe, like to cringe so hard I gave myself a headache. But he didn't actually do that bad, which was kind of also quite annoying. But like one of the things that Destiny literally goes, they bring up the grooming gang stuff, the rape gangs, and Destiny literally turns around and said, "Oh yeah, I looked into this. It was just a bunch of white guys." And that was as far as he was willing to talk on that.
Yep. Really?
Yep. That is the line that he went with it in the end.
It was just a bunch of white guys.
yeah. It was just a bunch of white guys all along.
Honestly, I find Destiny. he's such a disingenuous person.
Yeah.
I think there is limited value in talking to the left because they're not willing to actually discuss truth. They
Yeah.
only want their version of truth, which isn't truth at all.
Yeah, well, I was talking to a friend recently because he's recently gotten into Tolkien through AM's streams, and
Which are excellent, by the way.
yeah, and he was saying like that you can see a lot of like there's actually quite a lot of right wing thought in a lot of left wing people, and he was I mean he wasn't directly saying this, but a lot of people then go on to say, oh, we can red pill them, but you can't, because it's often motivated reasoning from their end. They make up these arguments to explain away their positions. They don't actually really care whether those arguments make sense, and they can pivot on a dime whenever they need to. So
I think that's true. I think the other thing you've got to look at, though, is that if you look at someone like Alexander Johnson, or indeed any of the leaders of the major political parties in the UK, I'm talking about the major parties, they don't really regard themselves as British, and they don't see their interests or even the people's interests that they're governing for as being the real British people. They just don't see that at all.
yeah,
I mean, what I would say is they might think it's good for the people, but maybe not. They may not have a concept of the British people. They just think, oh,
Yeah.
the people.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, George. Yeah.
Yeah, like, the people who are circumscribed to this plot between coordinates 232, longitude, and blah blah blah.
Yeah, I mean, like if you go back to the last person who I think was a real conservative prime minister, which would be Lord Salisbury, at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th, someone's making a lot of noise. I don't know who you are. I suspect it might be Napoleon.
It is.
Wait, what?
Mate, if you're going to be making noise in the background, could you mute yourself?
Wait,
please?
what?
We could hear you.
No, because.
Oh.
What can you hear? Because
We
I
could
can hear
you.
something.
Crinkles.
Crinkles and rappers and stuff.
yeah, you're eating a Kit Kat.
No,
I can hear it.
that's not me.
My opponent is a liar and cannot be trusted.
Okay, well, whoever it is, please mute yourself. No, I was just going to say, if you go back to the last guy who I regard as a truly conservative prime minister, Lord Salisbury, although he was an aristocrat and his family had been governing Britain going back to Queen Elizabeth I time, he absolutely identified himself with Britain and the interests of Britain. And I just don't think that's true anymore of people like Alexander Johnson, for example.
So you say that's like he was the last conservative prime minister. So
the last truly conservative prime minister, in my opinion, yeah.
So not Stanley Baldwin.
No, Stanley Baldwin. Well, look, to give Stanley Baldwin his due, he was dealing with the fallout from World War One, which is something we'll talk about on our stream when we do it about the book, which will be in a couple of weeks. We've got an announcement about that at the end of the stream. He was dealing with fallout from World War One, but he still didn't, as far as I'm concerned, devote himself to maintaining Britain's place in the world in the way that he could have.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think that's necessarily a conservative position, because you can make the case that actually seeking power of any, like seeking global power, is actually orthogonal.
Sorry, lost.
Because I mean,
you cut out there, mate.
Oh, did I? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I could make the argument. Let me know if you can't hear me, by the way. That seeking out power on the global stage is relatively orthogonal. So, for example, the USSR, which is a communist state, seeked global power, and so does the United States, which is a liberal order. So I don't think that's necessarily a conservative trait. I think caring for the people, trying to maintain some transience within before your government, between what was before and what will be after. It's pretty conservative policies, but like I don't know. I think trying to preserve your position on the global stage doesn't necessarily have to be a conservative thing.
No, I suppose it doesn't, but I still think that if you are the leader of Britain at the time of Stanley Baldwin, when we still had a worldwide empire, then it kind of like it beholds you. You need to do that, and you're not seeking it; you're trying to maintain it. In that instance, which I don't think he did a very good job of, to be honest. Which is why I don't count him as the last Conservative Prime Minister. I mean, I think he was better than some subsequent ones for sure, but that isn't saying very much.
No, I suppose not.
Was that your main thing there, George, or did you have
Yeah,
other stuff?
that was. I don't really have big stories this week or anything. I haven't been paying an immense amount of attention to the news.
Well, I did my usual look at the bias brainwashing corporations. I got a few things, but they're minor, and I'll bring them up after everyone else.
Yeah.
So if you don't have another one, we'll move on to Adamant.
Yeah, I actually want to take things across the pond, and talk about this bridge collapsing in Pittsburgh.
Well, I know nothing about this, so go ahead.
Okay, so I mean, it's kind of funny because it comes off the back of, I think, on one of AA streams this week, because I don't think I finished watching it, but they talked about like infrastructure issues in America, and then as if on cue, this big bridge collapses. And I've been looking into some of these, and they actually have a thing in Philadelphia where they've been covering the underside of bridges with nets to catch all the falling concrete because they're in such dire need of repair. And in fact, this specific bridge, someone posted pictures of it from 3 years earlier, where the beams underneath were so rusted and rotten you could, like, they weren't even connected to anything. Some of them were literally just sitting there in the air, just connected on one end and not connected to anything on the other. And in this time, the city had spent $2.5 million on a universal basic income program, and they were also given some sort of £500 million infrastructure subsidy. I don't think they got the whole lot, but they got like a slice of that under back in 2012. So it must have been under Obama. And they spent this on various things, such as they have this report and program system called PennDOT, which is about dismantling systemic racism. And so yeah, and apparently bridges all over that region are like this, in horrific states of repair. And I just thought it was kind of funny because it's like, if you think about this sort of this Machiavellian definition of like the foxes and the lions, right? Where the lions is like your king and his men who forged the society, and the foxes are the sort of bureaucrats who subvert it, and so on and so forth. You kind of see this quite often. It's like children, right? If you give like young not young kids, but kids generally money, they see, oh look, I've got shoes, so I'm going to buy PlayStation games, and then 2 weeks later you see them with tape all over their shoes because their shoes were falling apart. They don't they see things as it exists now, and sort of treat it as if that is just in perpetuity, and any money they get can be pushed elsewhere, or resources or anything. I don't know. I just thought it was a funny observation.
The context I do know behind this is that Joe Biden announced through Congress like a $2 trillion infrastructure program. For those who don't know, the US doesn't have that kind of money, but they announced it to basically as a plan to downgrade inflation. And it's a pretty typical thing that, like, if you want to improve, if you want to decrease inflation without decreasing government spending, most economists will tell you need to pay for more roads and better internet and all that, for boring reasons that I won't go into. But it's quite funny because as new technologies have been created, they all end up being assigned into the bin of infrastructure. So back in 100 years ago, the infrastructure bill would have been railways and maybe an electrical grid. But now it's telecommunications, it's the internet, etc., etc. And the government, most governments generally do not increase their infrastructure budget in proportion to that. So what you basically get is a budget that's designed to maintain the roads of a country being being spent on faster download speeds. But yeah, I mean that's my first comment. My second comment is: has anyone seen the Fox News guy who he tried to get a question to Joe Biden, and
It's about inflation when he
Yeah.
called him. I forget what he said, but yeah, that was so.
he was like, Joe Biden was like, "You dumb son of a bitch! Inflation is great."
Of course it is. Of course it is. Yeah.
I think I've actually got the quote. I'm gonna have a look.
I hope it is great because we're going to get a hell of a lot of it, surely.
Inflation is fantastic for the first people that get the newly printed money. It just starts to get pretty grim for the people at the bottom of the tree very shortly after.
Yeah, and it's also it's kind of like I'm not sure you're the financial guy here, John. It's kind of like a tax on savings too.
Inflation's pretty brutal, and basically the governments have three ways of making money, and only one of them essentially isn't inflationary, and that's taxing people. If they borrow money or they print money, eventually that's going to end up causing some element of inflation.
So here's the quote, right? The Fox News journalist said, "Will you take questions on inflation then? Do you think inflation is a political liability ahead of the midterms?" And then Biden replied, "No, it's a great asset. More inflation. What a stupid son of a bitch."
Oh my god!
Wow!
He's gaga. He's just gaga.
Didn't he also say that cars are causing inflation?
Yeah, I think he might have done. Yeah.
This damn cars printing money out their exhaust pipes.
When you first brought this up, Adam, and I thought this was going to be another case of a couple we've heard in America, that it was a bridge built by feminist engineers.
Well, it may well have been. I mean, the thing is, it's a lot of this is infrastructure that was thrown up in the sort of 60s and 70s, isn't it? That's during a sort of period of large expansion.
It is interesting. This is on a very macro scale, but you can see it in the micro scale of individuals, and people don't understand where what they inherit came from, and so they have no ability to maintain what they've inherited. It's the whole, what's it like, rags to riches and back to rags again kind of thing. Like the kids of today have no idea how their parents got the assets that they've got. All they do is complain that they don't have the same assets as their parents after a lifetime of laboring, and then they wonder why they've got nothing. And it's the same with these bridges. They don't understand. We don't understand today the engineering work that went into producing and maintaining them. We just assume that they're always going to be around forever. And like you say, Ataman, that the money that should be invested in those, they're there already, so we can spend it on something else.
Yeah, and one of the things I noticed, I was looking at after I was looking at that, I went and looked up. I saw some images of the New York Public Library that was built, I think, sometime around World War One. I'm not sure exactly which side, but around 100 years ago, a little over 100 years ago. And that was actually bought and paid for by private investors. But it's stunning.
As so often a lot of libraries were,
yes,
and a lot of yeah.
And funny enough, the Detroit Public Library as well is an absolute piece of art, unlike the surrounding city now.
Yeah.
There are these things in Australia called mechanics institutes, which were put up in the 19th century. And they're usually quite nice buildings because they were put up in the 19th century, and they're not mechanics institutes anymore. Of course, it doesn't exist. But I mean, what it basically was a place where intelligent working guys could go, and they had libraries and could improve themselves. And they were specifically for that. And there was a lot of that stuff in the 19th century in places like Australia and Britain and also in the USA.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever watched any of these history programs. I think Vikings may have done this kind of thing where they basically, they interpret the Anglo-Saxons as kind of living in the shadow of the Romans, and they're sort of inhabiting all these wonderful Roman buildings that they would have no idea how to build themselves, kind of thing. I don't know how true that is in reality. There's probably an element of truth to it, but
there was definitely a element of truth to it, but I think it's exaggerated a bit in things like Vikings.
Of course, but I feel like there's an element of that today where we're kind of playing in the mud with like gender dysphoria and stuff like that, while the kind of crumbling ruins of the things our ancestors built are sort of like falling down around us because we've got no ability to maintain or keep them up. And it does feel a bit like that to me.
Yeah, I totally agree. Dosastic Draco in the chat is saying many of Britain's first public art galleries were founded by private collectors to improve the public. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
and you had the same sort of thing in America. Like quite a lot of American museums and libraries and so on were started by some of the big industrialist guys in the 19th century, as far as I understand it.
I find it really frustrating today that all this stuff in the past would have been done off the back of private benefactors and philanthropists, and we've got to this really weird state of affairs where celebrities, instead of doing philanthropy for themselves with the millions that they earn and own, they instead petition the government, like Marcus Rashford, and then end up with a knighthood out of it because they demanded that other people's money be spent in a certain way. And it baffles me. It baffles me that someone can demand how to determine how someone else's money is spent and then get a knighthood for it, or a medal for it, or whatever, MBE or OBE or whatever he is.
Well, I mean, look at that vile scumbag Blair, who now has something like 1,200,000 signatures against his knighthood. I mean, and that used to be a military knighthood for like successful British generals and British admirals, and they're giving it to an utter filthy traitor like Blair, for God's sake.
Yeah, and that's been memory hold as well. Like, if you went on change.org and searched that petition, it would come up. It would come up, sort of near the bottom of the first page, and it would. They never made it appear on the sort of front page of change.org, even though it was a petition with
probably one of their fastest growing petitions, I should imagine.
It's one of the biggest petitions they've ever had in terms of people who've signed it.
Yeah, it was getting up there.
But change.org is a pretty left-wing organisation for the most part.
Well, this is the thing. Like, literally, a week later, this thing about the BBC comes out, with Boris getting rid of the BBC. As he said,
that'll be top, yeah.
Yeah, it was. I mean, they emailed that out to, I imagine, almost everyone that would have had a change.org account. I got it. I got the email and immediately just messaged a bunch of my friends on Facebook and said, "Have you got this email?" And almost everyone said yes. And I went and asked my nan as well, and even she had it. So they literally emailed that out to everyone.
Yep, I don't disagree with that, mate.
It does make you wonder why they want the BBC gone, but they're quite happy for Blair to have a knighthood. Maybe the BBC isn't as bad as we all think it is. I don't know. It makes you wonder. It makes you wonder why they're so keen to get rid of it. If
what the Tories?
Not necessarily the Tories, but sort of like the people running change.org.
They were. This was a petition to back the BBC. Yeah,
I was to say that.
Sorry, I got the wrong end of the stick there.
Yeah. This was them linking arms with Gary Lineker and various other intellectual heavyweights.
It's so cringe to see Gary Lineker coming out to. It's so predictable seeing all the people that are paid like millions of pounds a year coming out to protect the thing that pays them millions of pounds a year as the best thing since sliced bread. Yeah, I'm sure I would think it was the best thing since sliced bread if it paid me £10 million a year, however much you get. It's just so predictable.
Yeah.
Big time. Napoleon, I know you had something you would like to bring up.
I'm sure everyone's seen in the news and stuff, but Russia's kicking off again, apparently, and Alex Johnson has been, aggressive. I mean, that's how I interpreted the article.
He's not being aggressive, Napoleon, to be honest.
I posted about this the other day, and I said I'm not sure if the inflation is to distract from Russia or if Russia is to distract from the inflation.
I'm pretty sure it would be Russia to distract from inflation. Being realistic.
Excuse me 1 second, chaps. You carry on talking. My little dog wants to go out the back, so I've got to lay him out.
I mean, it goes down to that sort of traditional thing that the left seems to hate Russia and the right seems to hate China for some perhaps obvious reasons. But so I suspect that everyone's going full ham on Russia because of. I mean, the other thing that Russia is it's probably the only major nationalist power right now. I mean, you could argue if China is.
It was quite interesting this week to see like news articles saying that Russian military are already operating behind the lines, and Joe Biden's saying how it's going to be a terrible catastrophe, and phoning the Ukrainian president and warning him about it, and I saw something where the Ukrainian president basically said, "Look, chill out," and I feel sorry for Ukraine because they're basically going to be used as a battleground for Globo Homo, to satisfy whatever interest Biden and that coterie of people have got, and he's desperate. I've just got this image of the president desperately trying to downplay everything because he doesn't want to get stomped by Putin, and he doesn't want Biden to use his state as a battleground to distract from domestic problems.
Well, yeah, the Ukrainian president also said that American troops would be safer in Kiev than they would be in Los Angeles. And I thought we're at that point in history now where, like, even the puppet states are laughing at the empire.
Well, they're not going to get turned transgender in Kiev, are they? That's the.
No. I was just about to say. I mean, presumably, if they're women soldiers, that's definitely true. But there we go.
You think the Ukrainian army was like 80% women if you went by the photos in our media?
Oh yeah, in the bias brainwashing corporation, yes, those strong, independent Ukrainian women are going to stop Putin's tanks.
I was going to bring that up.
It is. If you go by the reputation of the Red Army, it is shortcutting the problem by putting the women at the front instead of at the back.
Yeah. Listen, look, my opinion on this is two things. First of all, Alexander Johnson is like kind of trying to make up for the fact that Germany's too scared to do anything. That's on one level, because Germany is just too scared to do anything. I mean, it was like Holocaust remembrance.
Well, I mean, last time Germany did anything, I mean, they didn't go too well for them. So
it didn't work. No, it didn't work. But the last couple of times, Germany.
It wasn't. It wasn't great the time before that. Did they do all right against the German French War? Was that all right?
That was the one we stayed out of very sensibly. But yeah. But yeah, I think he's trying to do that. But the British Armed Forces, particularly the British Army, is so pathetically small and weak these days, and has such relatively bad equipment that it doesn't really make any difference what Alexander Johnson does, because the British Army isn't big enough to do anything. But in addition to that, even if the army was bigger than it is, we can't supply them in Ukraine, and that also applies to the USA. Like, the USA can't intervene effectively in Ukraine. There is no way the logistics would work.
It depends on Turkey, doesn't it?
Well, even if Turkey was friendly, which they're not particularly, but even if they were, it wouldn't work.
Well, yeah, I
It's
mean, this
just
is the
wrong
issue.
place.
Like if they let you through the Bosphorus, and then Russian aggression makes them have a change of heart. You know, it's a complicated. You've just turned it into a way more complicated situation.
To me, the best that the Americans could do, well, actually, the worst the Americans could do, it'd be the worst thing they could possibly do, would be to send something like an airborne division there, which would just get overrun by Putin's tanks. There is no way the West can effectively intervene in Ukraine. It's not possible. And my honest opinion is I don't really care who runs Ukraine. I really don't. I don't care if it's Putin. I don't care if it's Ukrainians. It makes no fucking difference to me. And it makes no difference to Britain.
I think I support Ukrainian self-determination, but
not to the extent of killing any British soldiers.
Not in this purely NATO versus Russian pissing match.
The problem with self-determination is that part of self-determination is the ability to self-determine, and if you don't have that ability, then that's on you.
Yeah. And it's not somewhere the West can intervene. It's just not. It's not close enough to the ocean. You know, America and Britain are oceanic powers. We're not land powers.
Well, this is a problem America has always had with its empire, because its empire is you know, aside from the Philippines and so on, a lot of its empire has been sort of a soft power empire rather than a hard power empire, and it's much more difficult to influence anything on the ground when it comes to military when you're trying to do a soft power empire, which is what they find out every single time they try it.
Well, look, I've been criticised in the past for saying that, you know, we could and maybe should do something about the Chinese Communist Party taking over Taiwan. Not because I particularly like Taiwan, just because if China takes that over,
I mean, if Taiwan want to buy some military hardware, I mean, we should sell it to them. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, and it's not even that. It's that if the Chinese Communist Party takes over Taiwan, their next target will be Japan and Australia.
I mean,
and it absolutely will be, because that's the trajectory that the Chinese Communist Party's on. But we could do something about that, because that's the ocean. Yeah, and it would be a naval and air war that we might win, but we're never going to win in Ukraine. It's just not possible.
I would have to ask when it comes to Britain. I think the problem I have with it all is if we had an empire still, I could absolutely understand getting involved in China, because, you know, Australia was a protectorate or dominion or whatever. And you know, there's a reason for being there. Like, I'm sorry, Iron Duke. I don't particularly care about Australia.
Well, I'm a Kanzuk supporter.
No, neither do I.
You know, but I'm a Kanzuk supporter. I know you two are little Englanders. I know, but
this is the thing. That. So I loved Iron Duke, the fact that when World War II was declared, Australia didn't declare war itself. It just announced that the mother country has declared war, and therefore we are at war. It didn't do what Canada and New Zealand and wherever did. It didn't go, oh, well, we're now declaring war as well. It just said war has already been declared, and therefore we are already at war.
Yeah.
But it's not like that anymore.
Well,
that relationship at least governmentally is gone. Like, the people may share a bond.
I don't think that's even totally true. I mean, you have to look at recent developments with the Royal Australian Navy in terms of the new frigate that they're buying, which is the new British frigate, and also the fact that there's just been recently this SSN deal between Britain and America and Australia for nuclear-powered hunter-killer submarines. This stuff is still going on. Australia is still a British ally. They fought alongside British troops in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
They fought alongside British troops in Iraq. And I don't support either of those two wars, but you know, we still fought them together.
I kind of come down.
Totally gone.
I kind of come down on this on the Powellite line, which is if basically the Commonwealth is a disaster for Britain, and if states want to be part of the British Empire, then they should be part of the British Empire, not trying to have their cake and eat it too.
Yeah, but I'll also come down on the Powell line, and bear in mind where was Enoch Powell just before World War II? He was in Australia.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
I'm not a supporter of the Commonwealth. I'm not. I'm a supporter of the old Commonwealth. And the old Commonwealth was the old white settler Commonwealth, which is to say Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and back in the day, South Africa. That's the bit I support. I don't support all those ridiculous countries in Africa, etc., at all. You know, and the fact that India now claims it's in the Commonwealth, I don't care about all that shit at all.
I don't see. I hate. India's a republic. How can it be in the Commonwealth with the Queen as a monarch at the head?
Totally agree. Totally. Yeah, I totally agree. Look, to me, that because, as I said, I'm a CANZOC supporter, which is Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand. That's the only bit that I think is realistic. But there is so much pause in all four of our nations that it's going to be a very uphill battle to get anywhere.
Hey, we've been slightly liberated recently because Boris Johnson can't follow the rules. So you know.
Yeah, we have. I'm gonna come on to
when Dan and Jacinda and Trudeau are swinging from some lampposts in Minecraft, maybe we can talk about it. But
yeah, no, I don't disagree. Look, I hate the horse-faced feminist in New Zealand, as indeed do many New Zealanders that I know. And like, I obviously, because I live in Victoria in Australia, I absolutely detest Dan Andrews. And I'm not all that keen on Scott Morrison, to be honest, the Australian PM.
Am I right in thinking that? So Canada's obviously a left heavily. I mean, not even. I know we call the Conservatives a bit of a, left-wing party masquerading as a Conservative party, but in Australia you have the actual left. Not in Australia, sorry. In Canada you have the actual left. In New Zealand, I'm going to assume Jacinda Ardern is the actual left.
Well, she used to work for Tony Blair, so that should tell you what you need to know.
Okay, fair enough. And then, but is Australia in the same sort of position as England, where it's like notionally a Conservative party, but they look very left on the face of it?
Yeah. In Australia, the Conservative Party is called the Liberals, just because Australia is difficult. It's a bit like in Australia, the Labor Party is called the Labor Party without a U, but Labor.
Why?
No, I have no idea, because Labour in Australia is spelt the same way as it is in England, but the Labour Party is only LABOR. But I don't know why that is.
People need to be different, okay?
Yeah, some Aussie will probably tell me, but I don't know why. But I mean, Scott Morrison's Liberal Party in Australia is pretty much along the same lines as Alexander Johnson's so-called Conservative.
I do feel like Britain has managed to withdraw from the brink somewhat, just because we were fortunate enough to elect a bit of a joker of a leader who can't manage to toe the same line that Ardern, Trudeau, and t'other one seem to have managed to at least done publicly. Whether they've done privately, I highly suspect.
You're absolutely right, John. But let me just explain one thing, which I don't think a lot of people in the UK often get, is that Australia and New Zealand and Canada are very much the same as UK in some respects. And one of the respects they're the same is if you go outside the major cities, and in Canada in particular, if you go towards the west and the Midwest of Canada, it is much, much more right wing. The problem you have in Canada, Australia, and New Zealand is that, like in Canada, it's the big cities in the east, which is where most of the votes are and most of the population is.
Yes.
It's the same in Australia, and it's the same to some degree in New Zealand, and that therein lies the problem. But it's a bit like UK. If you just looked at London, you'd think like Britain was so paused, it's unbelievable.
Well, it's for the same reasons, isn't it? If you don't live in the big city, you're probably far more likely to own your own home. You're especially when it comes to Canada and Australia and so on. You have to be far more self-sufficient because things are just a lot further away. You can't just pop to your local shops or whatever, and you can't walk around the corner. And that probably lends itself to a bit of a conservative attitude, a bit of a do-it-yourself. Don't rely on the state. Get on and
yeah. It's the Midwest and not the extreme West. The extreme West of Canada has the same problem as like Los Angeles and so on in America. But the Midwest of Canada is basically the heartland of the place where there's still lots of ranchers and farmers and all these kind of people.
The problem with the cities is the same problem there's always had with the cities, in that they're anywhere people. A lot of people move to the city because it's where you obtain work or whatever, particularly low paid work, and
it's where most of the immigrants arrive as well.
Well, exactly. It attracts a lot of people that aren't from there, and so it just becomes this bunch of anywhere people who don't, who aren't particularly affluent, who aren't particularly self-sufficient, and they just, if there's a state there willing to buy their vote, then they'll take it.
Yeah, but I mean, I do want to get this across to British guys, particularly because I know we have a lot of British viewers. That, like, if you're looking at Australia and Canada and New Zealand, it's very easy to go get away with the idea, they're so paused and lefty and all the rest of it. And if you're looking in Australia, for example, at Melbourne and to a slightly lesser degree at Sydney, absolutely true, just is. But that ain't most of the country. They're just big cities, and it's a bit like when you see Melbourne, Sydney, think about London. Same thing.
They're the same everywhere.
Yeah, and you look at Ontario in Canada. Well, that's Toronto isn't the whole of Canada. So it's a bit like that. It's like there are more base bits of all of those countries. And the trouble is that we on the right, we on the right have no fucking power whatsoever in any of them, really.
Well, this is the thing. I get that individuals might be quite conservative, but that when you're butting up against a government that wants to, I mean, I read somewhere this week that if you go shopping in Canada and it's not a food shop, someone has to follow you around the shop if you don't have a vaccine pass.
Wouldn't surprise me, mate. Right. I know they've got a lot of problems with their truckers, which is something Asserman.
Something like a 70-mile convoy or something, or a 70-kilometer convoy.
Well, they're trying to stop
a political journalist actually came out and called fascist.
Yeah, because like Canada gets loads of imports from the USA, and they're trying to stop people crossing the border into Canada who don't have 4 vaccines or whatever the latest nonsense is they're talking about.
Well, this is the thing I don't get. Like, how when it was one vaccine, you could kind of understand it, but you get to the point where again, I'm trying to assume there's no malicious intent behind it all. I'm trying to assume it is literally they think they're doing the best thing.
I don't believe that about.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I understand that, but I think for the politicians, a lot of them, I don't think they're particularly intelligent. So they probably think they're doing the best for whoever. So on that basis, I can understand why they might think that some of this stuff makes sense for one vaccine. But when you get to the point where you're basically talking about having one every quarter, surely something's got to click and they just go, this just doesn't make any sense anymore. There's no ration. Like, how can you possibly police millions of people having 4 jabs a year to keep up with this vaccine? It's just never going to work.
Triple five in the chat says, "Have patience. Like the Taliban, the vaccine narrative is crumbling."
It does seem to be falling apart.
Yeah, I do think that's starting, and we have to give him his due. Alexander Johnson has played a fairly big part in that, to be fair. And I'm no Alexander Johnson fan, as people know, but he has.
This is the thing when you're England has grown up with a common law system, and that means that often judges in local jurisdictions, if the King's edict said one thing but didn't make sense, or it wasn't particularly applicable, they would overrule it. And it's the same with this. Boris Johnson's tried to and so we've grown up with that inculcated in us, and Boris Johnson has tried to implement an onerous rule which no normal person could possibly keep in the course of living a normal life. And so, of course, it's just ridiculous. No one can be possibly expected to keep it. It's an impossible thing. And so, because because we have an English culture, it's just an anathema to us. I'm sure it works wonderfully in France or wherever, because they've got the continental system, and I don't know. I just feel like there's something in the English character that opposes this kind of thing instinctively.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I'm going to ask you guys, and particularly Atman, because I know he's worked in that field. Nemo in the chat says Tesla robotics is going to wipe out the truckers soon. They're all going to be unemployed in 20 to 30 years. I'm going to press F to doubt that, but what do you think about it, Atman?
It's hard to say. I mean, I'm kind of someone in the chat several streams ago. I was very doubtful about self-driving cars, and they said to go check out a specific YouTube channel that did a lot of work on like demonstrating self-driving cars, and I'm still quite doubtful about it.
Do you think they're going to end up a bit like the 3D TV?
Maybe. I mean, like, because I've been looking at getting a new car, right? And I've actually looked at some Teslas, and one of the things that's come
making
up,
bank.
one of the things that's coming up in all the reviews is that the self-drive function isn't worth the money because it's basically non-existent and hasn't improved in years. And Teslas is supposed to be the pinnacle example of self-drive technology in the industry. And I mean, like, for example, I went and looked at the Tesla truck, right? The electric truck that they've made, which is actually from a sort of technological perspective, it's pretty impressive. I think it does 550 miles on a charge. The problem is, right? I mean, the thing with the trucking industry, one of the things that you'll hear all the time is they'll say, "Oh, a truck never drives empty. It's never empty. It's always got cargo on board because you've got to pay for it." That's a complete bollocks, right? That's complete bullshit. Trucks spend a lot of their time empty. There's a huge amount of trucks that are on the roads just driving around with like a pallet or two in the back, sometimes with nothing at all. I mean, I've seen trucks coming all the way from like, the far reaches of Eastern Europe. Literally, so I mean, we literally had one this week that came in from Ukraine with 2 Euro pallets, which are like half-size pallets. A full lorry could have taken 44 pallets, and it had, probably about 12 square foot of cargo on it, and weighing, I think, a total of like 3 tons. So, the thing is that the logistics in the trucking industry is horrendous, and no one actually wants to pay out good money for good logistics. And trying to plan out trips around a truck that has limited range is something that most companies just do not want to touch. And I mean, there was actually a story. There's a YouTuber who I think is based in Ireland, and he just screams about Brexit all the time. It's sort of living in their heads rent free. I mean, Brexit has ruined these guys. It's basically created a whole generation of like schizo leftists. But and he was talking about this story from Ashford in Kent about truck stops, and he was saying, "Oh, this truck stop, it's ruined the local area for the locals there." The thing that wasn't said in that story is that there's actually 3 truck stops in the same street in that place, and there's always been at least 2, and they've just built a third one. And this third one's supposed to be all state of the art. It's got all sorts of stuff there. No charges anywhere in sight.
Could I just ask you, Herman, like the thing I really don't get about this self-driving truck schlep that we keep hearing about is like, how are they not going to have accidents and run over civilians and dogs and little old ladies? And I just don't see it.
I can answer that for
Well,
you.
they will have accidents, and they will be programmed to have accidents in certain circumstances. Whereby, what I mean to say is, if it's like the trolley problem, right? They'll be programmed to run over someone if it means saving 10 other people, kind of thing.
I just don't see how it's going to work, mate. I really don't. I don't see how you.
It's not, because the first time it happens, it will be a disaster, and it will set it back 5 years. And every time it's a bit like fracking in the UK. Every time there's one of those small earthquakes, they can't do it for a year, kind of thing. It'll be the same thing.
But isn't it a bit like, airliners? Like, in theory, we could have self-flying airliners, but like the public wouldn't use them because when there's an emergency, the AI can't cope.
Well, the AI could theoretically cope with these days, but it's just the way you manage it is you basically it's the same way in which you have to you basically give the computer a whole bunch of like scenarios. Like for a case of a driverless car, you give them like millions and millions of different videos of people walking across, and it has to figure out when to go forward and when not to go forward.
It's not going to work, mate.
It has worked before, and the reason I know, and it's already worked on simpler projects, and
I think
it's actually a doctor. There's a doctor used by MIT.
It's going to work in theory. It is not going to work in practice. I'm absolutely sure.
There's a self-programmed doctor at MIT that can basically manage operations and tell doctors what to do and all that.
Would you go under? Would you go under his knife?
I mean, it has better performance acts than real life doctors. So from a purely logical perspective, I should be okay with it.
But you're not. I can hear in your voice you're not.
I certainly wouldn't want to be the first person to be put under it, but I'm okay with the
10,000.
No, I'd be the 10th. I'm happy to be the 10th.
No, I'm sorry, man. It's like if you get into a situation like that big bird strike that hit that airliner after it had taken off in New York, and the bloke put it down in the river in New York, there's no way I would ever do that.
But equally though, Angie, there's just as often been occasions where, and I think Malaysia Airlines was a big one.
People have made mistakes.
Where people are tired and they make mistakes that simply wouldn't happen in an AI system.
Yeah, but do you know what? I'm strange, you see, because like I have this faith in British pilots and Australian pilots, and back in the days,
I mean, they have a very good safety record.
Yeah, back in the day, South African pilots. I do have this faith in these guys that I wouldn't necessarily have in a Malaysian pilot. To be honest.
Do you know why part of this is? And it was covered in. I'm not sure it's Tipping Point or one of these novels. That it's because again in the Anglosphere we have a tradition and an ability to challenge upwards, which they do not have in many of these, Far East countries where hierarchy is more important than life itself. In the Anglosphere, we have a tradition of challenging our direct superior and saying, actually, no, I think we need to do this, or no, I think you might be wrong.
There are channels on YouTube, John, where you can watch like almost every major air accident there's ever been in history. Yeah? And what has struck me, because I watch quite a lot of them because they're quite interesting, horrifying in many cases, but interesting, is that what you find when you watch them is that the pilots who generally manage to make their aircraft survive or fight the longest to make their aircraft survive are almost always Anglos. They're almost always Brits or Americans or Canadians or Australians, New Zealanders, sometimes white South African guys, and occasionally Japanese. I have to give a shout out to the Japanese on that. They're pretty good.
No,
But a lot of the people who are not
2
are
nukes weren't enough.
Chinese. Well, listen. I detest World War II Japanese people, but I don't mind them these days. That's my opinion. But and I
Because they
think
watch the same form of cartoon that Duke likes.
no, that's not true at all. I don't watch cartoons of any description.
Are you talking about hentai, are you?
I don't watch any of that shit.
We've got to keep this server not safe for work.
I actually don't watch any of that shit. But anyway, I watch some strange shit, but it ain't that. But no, these guys, like, they generally experienced, they're often ex-military, and they will do all sorts of things, and very often they will allow their passengers to survive. And in many of those cases, I think it's impossible that an AI would be able to do some of the bloody crazy things these blokes do to make their aircraft survive.
No, but I mean, it is very good at making calls. So, for example, something that I think everyone in here will probably likely go, yeah, well, of course it is AI with crime. So if you basically tell an AI, okay, I need you to predict
God, here we go.
Where most of the crime's going to be.
I really.
You're going towards crime here.
I'm gonna do an Iron Duke here and say I really don't want AI doing anything like that. Listen, I think there'll be a place
really
for it.
Good at it. It's really good at it. It also has certain things you can basically say, like, I mean, everyone, like, so someone said earlier that AI is often based, and it's actually truer than you would think, because, like, if you include something like race to guess who's going to do the crime, and you basically say, no, AI, you can't do that anymore, it will basically find other proxies to basically do the exact same thing.
Here's something about based AI and race. I know someone who worked for a particular a company, say, that provides a shower experience, and they designed a new shower that could store your presets and recognize you by your face and all this kind of stuff. And they got it to market, and it was only once they got it to market that they found out it doesn't work on colored people. It can't detect their faces.
All right, guys, I've got one for you here. All right, that I think all of us can talk about, including Napoleon. Nemo says in the chat, and this was a while ago, but I noticed it and I thought I'd bring it up. The Taliban, what? Laughing out loud, the Taliban is pure satanic evil. Not sure why anyone would speak positively of them. Absolutely demented. Well, look, I don't think they are. The Taliban, I don't think they're particularly evil. I didn't like them when they were killing British soldiers, but I didn't want British soldiers in Afghanistan. Are the Taliban satanic evil, guys? I don't think they are, really.
I don't particularly care, and I can only assume that the Afghanistan people want to be ruled by the Taliban because they had 10 years to not be, and they basically chose to be. So,
well, more like 20 years, actually.
Well, yeah, you're quite right. Yeah,
it's very interesting because it actually goes back to the origins of the Taliban, because now the Taliban does some pretty awful things. For example, they've bombed school buses in which little girls are going to school because little girls can't go to school, bro. So you're going to kill them as opposed to doing anything else. But the origin of the Taliban in the 1990s was to do with the fact that many officials in the then standing Afghanistan government, which I believe was communist at the time,
hugely corrupt.
Well, that's not the end of it. They weren't just simply corrupt. There is an old Afghanistan and northern Pakistan practice called Baki Bazi.
Oh, yeah, the little
in
boys.
Which little boys, not little boys,
14, 15-year-old
pubescents
boys
are basically made to dance around. And actually, I discovered recently, they're not the only people in the Islamic world who do this. The Turks used to do it too.
Yes, they did.
Another reason why we should never like Turks. But see, I finally got you to say never like a Turk. Anyway, But the Taliban basically rose up against Bakibazi. Now they rose up because, I mean, in Islam, it's haram. So it got very, very. They gained a lot of traction from that, and then they also gained a lot of traction from all other sort of old cultural practices in Afghanistan that go against Islam, and so, I mean, they do. Like, the Taliban is not the nicest group of people in the world,
Who
but
is?
one who is.
Us.
Two, well, yeah, but we're too nice, aren't we?
Yeah, we're a bit too nice. Exactly.
But and the other thing you could add is that, like, you know, if the people want to be ruled by a religious state, I would. It may. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that, like, a religious state may or may not be preferable to what we're going to be living in soon enough. I don't know, but, like,
Well, I hope we're not going to be living in it, actually, George, but we'll see.
yeah, but, like, you know, it's an open-ended question what we're heading towards. Would you rather live in that, or, like, I mean, I don't know.
Look, I don't care if the Afghan people don't want feminism. I really don't. And if they don't want female soldiers and female film directors and all the rest of the absolute bollocks that we have in the West, I don't care.
No, here's the thing, and you know, I wrote the section on sort of like globalism on the Wellington Project website, or Global Britain, I should say. And you know, if Afghanistan want to do trade deals with us, then I think it's perfectly acceptable for us to say, actually, we don't particularly like this practice, and if you want to carry on with this practice, you can't do a deal with us. But I'm not particularly interested in importing our culture to places of the world that don't want to have any dealings with us and don't want to do the same things as us. I just have no interest, like you say, in forcing Afghanistanis to accept, transgenderism, for example. It's just I don't care. If they don't want it, they don't have to have it. I'm not interested in forcing them.
Well, no, we shouldn't have it. I don't even care about.
Well,
Afghanistan,
yeah, exactly.
But I mean, I don't know if you ever saw it, John. But there's a pretty well-known a video on YouTube where you can watch this idiot, moronic, left-wing feminist woman teacher in Afghanistan, an English one, or British one anyway, trying to teach these Afghan women about modern art, and she's showing them that urinal from, I don't know, what was it, about just after the First World War in France. I can't even remember the bloke who, in inverted commas, was called the artist who did it. And these chicks are just looking at her like she's insane, because she is insane.
She is insane, yeah.
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 Yeah, Bakabazi's pretty disgusting, but don't care, don't like him, don't like muzzies, simple as.
Yeah, no, I'm not fans of them at all, mate. But on the other hand, look, the idea that when the Taliban kicked the Americans out of Afghanistan very quickly, that everyone on the right was going, "Oh, base Taliban." I don't agree with that at all, because that was like pretending the Chinese Communist Party is our mate, because they're not. But at the same time,
it's almost like if we all just,
if we were all really diverse, we'd all have different ideas.
Well, this is what I was going to say. It's almost like we should all live in our own separate cultures and do our own thing, and leave each other to get on with living our own thing
under the British flag.
Yeah, but bro, then how am I gonna have freedom of movement? That's like a right,
you can have freedom of internal movement within your own country.
How many countries have you been to, George?
Oh God, damn. It's quite. Do I have to count this? I'm joking about freedom of movement, by the way.
I've got a serious point to make about this, which is why I asked you.
Well, I come from the other side of the fence. I technically have never been to another country, because Wales doesn't count as a country.
All right then, that's fine.
Oh, yeah. So are we counting England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland as different countries, or?
Scotland is a different country.
Well, no,
Thank you.
it is. It is
No, it
actually.
Wales is not.
It's
Northern
different-
Ireland is.
It kind of is. But what I would say is like overall, how many countries have you been to, George?
I'm still counting. 15.
Yes, that's where I'm at. I'm about 50.
Not 50, 15.
Oh, sorry, I'm about 50. All right.
Jeez,
Adam,
globalists.
Mate, I've lived for years on 3 different continents.
I'm Duke isn't anywhere person confirmed.
No. That's actually not true in my case.
Citizen of the world.
No, not true at all. I've lived in 3 different continents for years, and that was like UK, obviously, where I was born, South Africa, and then Australia, and they're all old Commonwealth countries, and they all had a great deal in common. But I've been to about 50 nations altogether, if you count British overseas colonies. But I would just say that we've always had freedom of movement. It's, okay, you had to get a visa and you had to do this, that, and the other, and what's wrong with that?
Yeah, but I'm a citizen of the world, Duke, and I have the right to go wherever I want, and that means
I didn't know you were homosexual.
Yeah, absolutely correct. Absolutely
citizens of the world have no jurisdiction with regard to sexuality.
No, I think you have to be LGBTQ plus to be a citizen of the world now. I've heard.
Possibly.
But I've never been a citizen of the world. I've always been an Englishman. But I have travelled a lot. Like I live in Australia, and I've lived in Australia for 22 years now. But I'm still an Englishman. I'm not an Australian.
No, you can. Yeah.
When I lived in South Africa for 15 years, never made me a South African. I was an Englishman who lived in South Africa, or what South Africans would call a soap peel, which you can go look up, which is rude. That means you have one leg in Europe and one leg in South Africa, and your dick's hanging in the sea.
Well, if your dick's hanging in the sea, it's quite a long one, isn't it? So you should feel quite proud.
I'm not saying a word, mate. I never speak anything but the truth. But but yeah, I don't get this shit that we have to make everywhere the same. And England and South Africa and Australia have many similarities. They have a lot of blood and history together, but they're not the same. And you have to adapt. I couldn't live in Australia as an Englishman. I have to change a bit because there are things in Australia which are not the same. And if I want to live in Australia, it's up to me to adapt, not for Australia to change.
Just stick up a flagpole in your garden, run up the Union flag, and salute the Queen in the mornings. Rule Britannia.
Mitch pointed out a weakness in your guys' thought. Who's going to hand you your sandwich at Pret, you guys? I mean, for real.
I can safely say I've never shopped in Pret.
John, I have to tell you that the first thing you see as you come into my house is a Union Jack.
Oh, nice one. No, I'm not.
Union Jack's bigger than yours.
It's the first thing you see as you come into my house. But I also have the old, not the new one, obviously, not the Y fronts, but I have the old South African flag and a little Union Jack that sit on my study desk where I am doing this stream from. So I mean,
God, you wouldn't want to be seen with that flag by anyone except your good friends.
I wouldn't give 2 shits, mate. Never have either. It was a good flag and it was a good country.
Well, I mean, if you fly that flag in the UK, I would have thought that would be like tantamount to like a hate crime or something.
No,
Sure.
you got
What, the Union flag?
No, the old South
the
African.
old. He's talking about the old South African flag, like based on the Dutch East India Company flag that in the middle had the Union Jack and the flags of the Transvaal and the Orange Free State.
Sure. I mean, listen, you can fly the ISIS flag in the UK and get away with it. So
Yeah, I reckon you probably could. Do I have a picture of the Queen on my wall? Raw Biscuit says in the chat. No, I don't. No, I do not. Never have. Used to like her. My opinion of her is going down rapidly at the moment, but there we go.
Yeah, I think personally, like what's likely has happened is that since Philip has gone, the de facto pants wearer in Buckingham Palace has gone from Philip to Charles, and Charles is infected with POS. So
I actually totally agree with that. I think that Prince Philip was the base bloke who kept Queen Elizabeth II in line.
Do you think he was the one who asked what colour Archie was going to be?
Yeah, probably.
The missing. I suspect it was probably someone really innocuous like Edward.
I could quite imagine it being Andrew, to be honest. He seems like the kind of person.
Well, you know, I have a funny idea that maybe Andrew might have been would have been the Queen's primary influencer, but it's quite possible.
Well, she was his favourite son, wasn't she? Although I'm sure she's not too happy with him at the moment.
She might not believe it. Who knows?
I hope she doesn't believe it, because most of it's bullshit as far as I'm concerned.
Well, this is the thing. So if we're going to get into this, she was 17, which is above the age of legal consent in the UK.
Yes.
She's now pursued 2 men in civil courts for sexual abuse allegations instead of criminal court.
She was a professional prostitute for years.
She received £500,000 out of court settlement from Jeffrey Epstein, which meant that she was to not pursue any more people, and continued. That I think that was in the now unsealed papers of that original settlement. Yep. So she just, she just seems like a grifter. I hate to say it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
And listen, I'm not generally. Listen, I married older. I'm not particularly in favour of sort of 40-year-old men chasing 17-year-old girls, but it's not illegal.
Nope. That's my opinion entirely. And look, I think Epstein and what's her name, the Daily Mirror guy's daughter, that was almost certainly some sort of Mossad honeypot thing going on.
They were just trying to entrap as many people as possible.
Yeah, and
for
Epstein,
power, right?
Yeah, and it was a way.
It's a fairly typical traditional thing to do to get,
Yeah. And I mean, Epstein was plainly murdered in jail.
No, 100%.
And absolutely, the people who did it got away with it, and because the people who running the jail, the Americans, wanted them to get away with it. So, there it is. But I'm
not saying it was Hillary Clinton, but
could have been, yeah. But it certainly could have been her husband. But I know at least 2 people who served on HMS Invincible in the Falklands War, and they liked Prince Andrew. They said he was a nice bloke, he was a good officer, and he was brave. And I don't require much more than that from anyone, really.
Royal Biscuits chat in comment in chat made me laugh. I remember reading Prince Philip's autobiography near his death. He got 3 sets of gloves as a gift and gave the most feminine ones to Charles.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I mean, Prince Philip, who was actually a pretty good and brave naval officer in the Royal Navy in World War II, I think he was the one who was keeping Queen Elizabeth II honest, to be honest.
I mean, yeah, but he was definitely a stronger male figure than his sons. We'll put it that way. But
Wow.
yeah, there's
Well, didn't Charles cry about his public school, George? And you went to
yeah,
public
well,
school,
to be
so-
fair to him, Gordonston is even today known for how absolutely it is vicious. I mean, it's a great school. If you want to make a man out of your son, you send him to Gordonston. But
it's a Scottish school, isn't it?
well, yeah. So I think it's run near Aviemore, but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
But
Up where they used to do the commando training in World War II.
well, yeah. But Gordonston's big ethic was all about really hard physical work and then academics, which I can definitely see merit to with concerning teenage boys. But I mean, admittedly, boarding schools, just for the best of people, will make or break them. It's particularly full-time boarding schools. It's a pretty tough environment for a 13-year-old kid to go to. But so I'm not going to hold it against Charles that Gordonston was very harsh on him, because that's it's harsh on most kids. But
Well, here you go. Hang on, George. Right on Limbo, who's also a boarding school boy, I believe. He's saying Prince Charles was destined to be a weak prince. Look at the chap who got raped in Gordonston. Well, I don't know anything about that, so maybe you do. I don't know.
There's so much talk about public school sexual deviance. It definitely happened. I mean, it didn't happen at my. It didn't happen while I was there, but there's definitely been a history of sexual misconduct, because it's a very easy thing to do. Surprising, normally not by teachers, normally by older students to younger students.
Yeah,
but,
with the fagging system and all this kind of stuff.
Fagging is pretty normal. Fagging's just fagging's just when the prefects come find a pole to give you, and then bash you over as you try and swing around it or something like that. It's not like sexual abuse, but yeah, it's I mean, it depends, but boarding schools are pretty it's a pretty tough environment, particularly those first few years. So I mean,
look, George, I sent my son to a private school in Norfolk, which is well known for providing the Royal Navy with officers. But I sent him as a day pupil initially, and it was only when he was 14 he said, I'd really like to become a boarder. That I spoke about it with my wife, and we talked to him, and then we said, yeah, all right, that's all right, you can do that. But I deliberately didn't do it when he was 11, 12, because I thought that was too little to go and do that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, this could get quite cordoned off quite quickly. What I would say is that to everyone is that public schools are not the safe haven of the British, old-fashioned British aristocracy. That's just not what they are anymore. I can relay you a hilarious anecdote in which we had an equality society set up in my 5th form, and a homosexual dwarf came to deliver chapel one day.
God's sake. Guys, right on Limbu wants to join the chat, and I'm going to let him.
Yeah, sure.
Because he's a good chap. He's the son of a Royal Gurkha Rifles guy, so and he knows all about this boarding school stuff. So I'm gonna send him a link.
Listen, I need to head to bed, so I'll bow out and.
No worries, mate. No worries. You don't have to. Up to you.
Also, I haven't really been saying much because I don't really think that there's really going to be that much for me to add. So I might as well go, but thanks for having me on.
No worries, man. You can both of you can stay if you want. It's up to you guys.
Cheerio, everyone. Cheers, Duke.
All right.
Yep.
See you.
Cheerio.
No worries, gents. Hang on, I'm just going to send Limbu an invite. Where are you, my friend? There you go.
I'm just looking at the fees for Gordonson's now.
Oh yeah, it's not pretty.
It's
expensive,
pretty
I would guess.
reasonable compared to some of the other private schools.
So like
we
like the premium standards like Eton, and that's normally goes I think around 30 grand a term.
Ugh.
Yeah,
That's-
which
that's painful.
that's barbaric.
we looked at considering private school for when my son's old enough for secondary school, and he's homeschooled at the moment. I think we might end up homeschooling him for secondary school as well, to be honest, because, like you say, I don't think these places are.
They are not what they are not
No.
what they were.
Where I sent my boy was like quite reasonable, relatively speaking. I mean, it was by no means the cheapest, but it was like my wife and I could just about manage it. But like I said, there was no way he was going to be a boarder until he was old enough.
Oh,
Limbu, how are you going, mate?
Everything's going fine. I just came in the right time because, funnily enough, I've been boarding school itself. I've been in boarding. I've been boarding since I was in year 6. Matter of fact, so I've got the whole experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
For those of not of the Church of England, year 6 is 10 to 11.
yes.
Yeah. There's no way I would have sent my son to a boarding school at that age. I just wouldn't have. Although I kind of understand why Limbu ended up there, because his dad was in the position that he's serving the British Army. So, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's most students now who their parents are in the military, at least, or they mostly ship their sons and daughters to these really old public schools because either one, they have the privilege to do so, or two, it's due to location reasons. For me, it was that my dad was going to be located in Brunei, of course, Royal Gurkha. So he wanted a position that I could be in a British school after all. But however, they wanted me, of course, after year 6-ish, to go to a really, really posh international school in Brunei. So the school is called Jerodong International School. It's a massive school. It's one of those British schools, British Asian schools. So it's run by Fabicia, this British-owned education system in Asia, and the fees in this school was like about 40 grand a month, a semester, matter of fact, and it was
A term, yeah.
a term. It was massive. The school was massive in itself. However, the culture within the school, as the school was partly owned by the monarchs of Brunei, so the Sultan, it had this massive culture of let's really focus on divinity and Islamic divinity. However, we need to appease these like Westerners who come to this massive private school. So let's have this sort of mix of Islam, however, mixed with this sort of this cultural westernization. So you had this really weird mix in culture in the school after all. So it's not really public school culture, but
you're a Catholic, aren't you, Linda?
Oh yes, I am. Yeah.
So presumably that didn't happen there, or it happened before or afterwards.
I think I was a Roman Catholic when I was 10, officially baptized, all that.
All right.
However, what happened was that they tried to enforce these Islamic values on the school, of course, as of course it's international school. How they need to balance it out as it is international, of course. So they would keep these ethoses of Islam. However, at the end they wouldn't enforce it. But the older students there, they were part of the old Brunei hierarchy, of course. So they would often, if I have to say so myself, push for like a fagging system. However, push Islamic fagging styles, if I have to say so. So
That doesn't sound nice.
no, it did not. No, it was not nice. especially as a year 7 and year 8 child. No, that was not nice.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, it's something that people don't know is that like when your kid goes into boarding school, you send them in, they are on the bottom of the rung.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
In this thing that my school called hierarchy.
Yeah.
It was, if you wanted your break, if you wanted your tea break, and you were really hungry, tough shit, because all the older boys get to eat before you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie.
It's quite like the army in some respects. It has to be said. It
Yeah.
is. It's why boys used to go from a public school into the officer class in the army seamlessly.
But
Because
this is the thing: learning your place is really important to the
Oh, yeah,
psyche of a person. I don't mean like putting people down. I just mean, I went to state school, and the problem with state school, I found, especially modern state school, is that you're told you can do anything or be anything, and it's like, maybe, but you've actually, you've got to put a lot of effort in. It's not like it was always. It was almost almost like you didn't have to, it's just a given. Oh, you're a wonderful human being, you can do anything you want to do or be anything you want to be. And it's like, yeah, first you need to learn your place, and then once you've learned your place, you can learn what you can be and what you can do.
Oh yeah, definitely agreeable. Continuing on from that, of course, I learned discipline from my father. However, in boarding school, you learn really quickly where not to step out of line or where not to step out of line due to that cultural influence of older year lads, for the better or the worse. For example, my first year, I think in a British public school when I was year 9, I was being lippy to some older lads, and let's just say, I think it was middle of the night, I got kidnapped from my dormitory, and let's just say,
Jesus.
got kidnapped, and I was kidnapped into this massive common room, and let's just say a little trial was given out. Yeah, no, I learned not to be lippy ever since then.
Limbo, it's a good job you come from the bravest of the brave, mate.
One of the favorite activities we had was that, like, if you were sleeping snug and sound at 3 a.m., if one of the other boys didn't have a good night's sleep, he might get really bored and decide, you know what, I'm going to wake up this guy. But he doesn't wake you up by slapping you in the face. What he does is he gets the mattress, he flips it up in the air, and your body slams straight into the bottom of the bed.
Oh no, I have too much experience with that, lad. I think, I think this was in year 10. There was this like year 8 chap. I'm not going to name who he is, of course, but he was one of these massive dickheads, and I'm going to be real here. He kept on chatting shit because the school was trying to cut down on this older year priority system. So I had this funny idea with a few of my mates just to go to his dorm, get cold water, and just spray him. Just like get cold water, just splash him with all over, and that'll teach his place. I did it. It was the most hilarious thing I've done. Because not only did it put him in his place, he didn't snitch as well, which also showed me that he knew his place. So, I mean, it's got its positives, of course.
I would just say that, like, I certainly didn't go to public school. My old man was nowhere near rich enough for that. But in the army, one of the things that happens, and I suspect it's probably similar in public school, is that sooner or later you learn to stand up for yourself, and you stand up for yourself tough enough that other people start to leave you alone. That is what I would suspect, because that's certainly what happens in the army.
Oh yeah, no, army culture and public school culture, it definitely links together. I remember I was reading a book about Winston Churchill, how he didn't like the priority system in Harrow. Thus, there was this urban legend after his headmaster gave him the cane. he got the headmaster's famous straw hat, and he kicked the hat to death. It was broken his head apart. And thus there's this harrow ritual that every year they have to get the headmaster's hat and destroy it like Winston did. So, and of course,
Yeah.
we went to Sandhurst. Winston, he was a good man, of course. So, yeah, it does link.
In some respects, yes.
on that bombshell, I am going to bow. Thanks for having me on.
No worries, John. Good night, man.
Hope the rest of the stream goes well.
Cool, man. Thank you for joining.
Bye-bye.
But yeah, yeah. I mean, you're talking about Sandhurst. Sandhurst, I think, in some respects, was. I don't think today it is because it's so feminized today, but it used to be the ultimate public school in some respect. You know, you can hear stories of some of the people who went to Sandhurst, and slightly before that to what they used to call a shop, which was where the Royal Engineers and the artillery went, which was very similar. And you can hear some pretty wonderful stories in those places about people who were extremely violent, and it was kind of what rose them above the level of other people, really.
Yeah, I think I was having a conversation with my father on Gurkha recruitment and all that. He was telling me back in his day, in the early 90s, that the officers, I forgot what they're called, but the officers who stay in the barracks who look after the recruits, they used to ruthlessly beat him, my father, and they used to tell my father to do 100 push-ups for stepping out of line, doing whatever, like even a small mistake with making his little bed or misplacing anything.
For God's sake, Limbo, I hope you're not talking about British officers.
Oh no, Nepali officers, of course.
Okay, fair enough. I was just going to say, fair enough. Because like NCOs and people who are, that's the same in the British Army. Like the officers are generally all right, but pretty distant.
Oh, the officers are all right, yeah.
Yeah. This was in the old days, obviously. Now I think it's totally changed, but in the old days,
it's totally different. My dad.
I'm gonna bow out now because I'm actually, surprisingly enough, for this time of the day, I'm feeling very, very beat up.
It's the memories of your public school.
Oh yeah, it weighs on my mind. It weighs on my mind. I'm gonna.
I sometimes think it does a bit, to be honest. But yeah,
right. No. It weighs. It's meant to weigh on your mind. If it doesn't weigh on your mind, you didn't go to public school, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Right, I'm gonna bid you gents adieu.
No worries.
And all the best, and I'll see you when I see you.
No worries. Go well, man. We're only going to do about another 25 minutes anyway. I've learned to keep these streams to about 2 hours now. Max Ernest in the chat said it sounds like St. Trinian's. No, it doesn't. St. Trinian's was like cute chicks in stockings and suspenders. That is not public school, mate. I'm sorry, but it ain't. I wish it would probably be healthier if it was, in some respects. But anyway. But yeah, no, it's not. St. Trinian's was like cute 18-year-olds in stockings and suspenders, and like I used to kind of like those movies. But no, I don't think that's.
Of course you did.
I did. I listen. People have often said that I am. I was a rake hell in my young youth, and I probably was. So but whatever. I'm not dishonest. I mean, for God's sake, But yeah, I don't know, guys. Like I said, I didn't send my son to public school at 11 because I thought that was much too young. When he got to 14, he said, "Yeah, can I become a boarder?" And spoke to my wife, spoke to him, and we said, "Yeah, all right then."
Single sex.
But by that. Well, no, actually, it was like a lot of those schools in those days, Limbo, that they actually had a deal with a girls' school that like they spent quite a lot of time with girls.
No, I mean sister schools, sister brother schools, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, no, this was a public school. Like we had to pay his whole bloody fee, but it was a school that had a good record of producing Royal Navy officers, and he wanted to go in the Royal Navy, so that's why we sent him.
That's good, anyways. That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think it's true anymore, but it used to be that, like, even when I was a young man, your chances of becoming a British officer if you didn't go to a boarding school were not that great, and
Yeah, I think
unless
that's changed quite a bit.
unless you went through the like you got promoted route, then it was possible. But if joining the army as an officer, if you hadn't been to a boarding school, was pretty unlikely, to be honest. Which I kind of understand, partly because, like I said, there's a lot of similarities between the army and a boarding school. So
Yeah, I'm pretty sure as well. What I understand from the history of boarding schools is that they either come from orphanages, and orphanages often have this back-telling story of ruffian kids and hooligans, if you want to put it like that. And I know most schools in the South, I mean, especially ex-military boarding schools, they have this old stigma of old hooligan schools, you know. So no, I can certainly see where it comes from, Duke.
JD in the chat says, if I could redo it, I'd probably join the RN. JD, I joined the British Army when I was 18, and I totally agree with you. I would have joined the RN too. But there we go.
Well, I mean, that's kind of an interesting point, though, isn't it? Because one of the things that comes up on the right a lot is this idea that because the army is sort of part of the state that we don't like, you should sort of disavow it. You shouldn't be willing to go off and die in foreign wars that probably have nothing to do with us. But
yeah, I don't agree with that.
Well, yeah, but that's exactly the thing, though, isn't it? I mean, there is an argument to be made for the how much the experiences that you can gain from that are worth. Like, I mean, I watched this thing the other day. Some people might have seen this. It was a guy who was a gunner in one of these big planes, one of these big gunships, and he was talking about a bad situation he'd been in, which did sound quite horrific. But he said like that day I learnt the difference, like the real difference between anger and wrath. And I thought, like, there's so many experiences that you can get out of the military that you cannot replicate in modern civilian life in any means.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Look, I've never been against people joining the military because I think, particularly in countries like UK and to a slightly lesser degree Australia, where like your access to firearms is totally gone or nearly gone. It's the only way you can learn that stuff, and you can learn a lot of very useful stuff. You'll make good mates, and you will learn a lot of useful stuff. And if the shit ever really hits the fan, you guys, if you've been in the military, will stand a much higher chance of surviving.
Well, yeah, and as well, like, I mean, if you look, I mean, a lot of these historical figures who a lot of people will call base today, you can find quite a few of these guys who would literally go off and fight in a war that they had no care for, but they did it just because it was an opportunity to go out and have a bit of an adventure.
Yep. Yeah, totally agree. I don't have any argument with that whatsoever. I mean, man is an adventurous person or species, and yeah, totally agree. Where it falls down a bit for me is the Western forces today are getting so feminized; it's getting harder and harder.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm aware that the argument I'm making is is sort of withering away as the days go by.
Hang on, what are we looking here? Hang on, Right on Limbo is asking me thoughts on Boris' comments on Russian mothers. What on earth did Boris say about Russian mothers? I have no idea. I haven't
No,
seen
neither
that.
do I actually.
Limbo, you'll have to tell us when you come back, mate, because I have no idea. I haven't heard him say anything about Russian mothers. But yeah,
So it looks like he said that he warned Russian mothers that their sons will not come home if Putin invades Russia. Well, that's a bit of a.
well, that won't be because of the British Army, I can assure you, which is like
Yeah. No, I'm back.
the British Army is so ridiculously small today. It is smaller than it has ever been since it was founded in about the 1685-ish.
Oh, yeah.
After the English Civil War, and its equipment is terrible on the whole. It's not good. Like the British Army rifle is probably the worst assault rifle in the world, partly because it's so heavy, but also its ergonomics are terrible. And that's why the whole of the Royal Marines, all of the British Special Forces, and like about half of the paras have already abandoned it for the Colt Canada thing. And even that ain't very good, really, but it's better than the SA 80.3, which I think we're on. But yeah, the West ain't winning no war in Ukraine. It's not going to happen.
No, it's not. What are your thoughts if Boris would? Because I think what Boris is going to do, he's going to put a fast track on everyone. He's going to deploy lots of troops in Ukraine.
No, he's
Because
not. No,
I
he's not.
think he will. Because the whole lockdown situation.
No
to save
way.
character. I reckon
No,
he will. I
he's-
reckon he will.
No, listen, he hasn't got any troops to deploy. Like one of the two British armored regiments is in the Baltic states. So is one of the two or maybe three armored infantry regiments. He's got nothing to deploy. What's he going to put there? The parachute regiment, for God's sake? Against like hordes of Russian tanks and artillery? I don't think so. He's not going to do it. I hope he doesn't do it, because if he does, there's going to be an enormous number of British widows and orphans. And
Yeah.
B, he just shouldn't do it. It's ridiculous. Like I said, even
he
the
would do it,
Americans,
I can just
even
tell
the
it.
Americans, Limbo, even the Americans cannot effectively defend Ukraine, and Britain sure can't.
I know they wouldn't. You know how Boris and Biden are like. They're all to do it. I mean, it's for their political gain, isn't it?
I like to think he won't, and I tell you why I mainly think he won't is because I really don't think 1,000 British widows and orphans is going to do his election chances any good. So I don't think it will happen. Thank God. I don't think he'll do it.
But I think NATO might do something like. I mean, of course, you saw Germany because they're not doing it due to the Gazprom gas situation. But
also Germany is shit scared of doing anything.
yeah, they are. No, they don't.
World War II didn't work out too well for Germany. There's no way that Boris Johnson is going to put serious British military forces into Ukraine. He's not going to do it, mate. And I hope he doesn't, because they'll get killed. They will just get killed.
No, they would. That's the reality. Yeah, I agree with that. But what the likelihood of NATO and the Western idea of
it's all noise.
Ukraine? There's a strong chance.
It's all noise. We won't do anything. Guarantee you, we won't do anything. There's far more chance that we will do something about Taiwan than Ukraine, because Taiwan is doable. Taiwan is doable in a logistic sense, whereas Ukraine just ain't. It's just not doable logistically. You can't do it. Like Britain sent some anti-tank weapons to Ukraine, which I found quite ironic, given the British Army doesn't have enough of them for their own use. But we sent them. I wouldn't have even done that, frankly, because I don't care who runs Ukraine. I don't care if it's Russian or Ukrainian. It makes no difference. And why should anyone die for that? It's not a vital British interest.
But I mean, you say Taiwan is doable. It's very close. I mean, it's.
No, but
China can really flood that place.
No, it's in the ocean, mate. It's in the ocean.
I'm aware of where Taiwan is, but I'm just saying it's like obviously China doesn't have like force projection in the way that other big powers do, but Taiwan is literally next door.
But it's a few hundred miles off the coast, and you could have I don't know, maybe if there's enough warning, you could get maybe 3 US aircraft carriers, a British aircraft carrier, 1 or 2 Japanese aircraft carriers off that coast, and the Chinese are on a hiding to nothing.
Is it further away from the Chinese coastline than what's the name of that other island? Is it Hainan?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, the Hainan is where the Chinese practice for it.
Right.
It is a little bit further, yeah, and also Hainan has China on 2 sides rather than 1 side. And there's also a big mountain range in Taiwan. And if the Western Allies had any sense, they'll operate on the other side of that, which is going to make things much more difficult for the Chinese.
What, not do denied landings?
No, listen, the Chinese might be able to land, but also, like, one of the huge areas where the West is vastly more advanced than China is SSN hunter-killer nuclear-powered submarines. And if the Chinese try and do that, a load of their warships are going to go boom and like explode into a million bits for no apparent reason very quickly. And the Chinese can do almost nothing about that, because that is one area where the Americans and Brits particularly, but also the Chinese and Australians are ahead of them. And they will have a load of their warships just go boom as they're doing stuff.
Right.
And some of their troop ships too. And everyone talks about the Chinese anti-carrier hypersonic missiles. They may or may not work. In historical terms, no missile has ever worked as well as people said it would. No, not a single one. Now, that may change, maybe, but we'll see, I guess.
So, like, from a logistics perspective, what would our side operate from? Would we just run everything out of Australia? Or would we try and get something closer, like the Philippines or Brunei or something?
Guam is the main American base, but of course the Chinese will try and take that out. But, the Americans will defend it. You've also, the other thing that's going to happen that people, I don't know how much people get modern warfare, but those Chinese hypersonic anti-ship missiles, which may or may not work, they're going to be one of the first targets for stuff like submarine launched cruise missiles. So like an American or a British submarine can be under the water, quite close to China, and can fire these damn missiles as soon as we think anything's going to happen. And that will happen for sure. So a lot of those Chinese missile sites are going to get taken out before anything even happens. And the main thing that it would be a naval and air war. Like, we might send Marines and people like that into Taiwan, but it's mainly going to be a naval and air war. You're not talking about divisions of infantry soldiers or tanks.
Sure. What's Japan going to be doing in all of this?
Well, Japan has said at least 3 times now that she will defend Taiwan, and
Right.
quite sensibly, because if Taiwan gets taken, she's the next target, and then after that it'll be Australia.
I mean, yeah, sure, that's fair, but I mean, is Taiwan really a nation we want to defend? I mean, a bit like your point, that they're one of the most liberal fucking countries
Yep,
in Asia.
totally agree. Totally
Bit
agree with
like
you,
the
Limbo.
Americans.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, but I think we still have to defend it because the Chinese Communist Party is our enemy and is always going to be our enemy, no matter how many people on the right, in inverted commas, try and claim it's not.
No, I agree. The CCP are our enemies, bunch of bastards. I mean, but
Yeah,
is Taiwan really? I mean, should we defend it just like the enemy of our friend is our friend? I don't necessarily think that.
no, I don't think that either. But I just think that if you don't defend Taiwan, well, then are you going to defend Japan? Because what I think will happen is if the Americans, for example, and if the Americans don't do it, no one else will. Well, Japan might, I suppose, but certainly the Brits won't. If you don't defend Taiwan, are you going to defend Japan? And if I was the Chinese Communist Party, I'd think, well, if they didn't defend Taiwan, they're not going to defend Japan either. And if the Americans don't defend Taiwan, they're spiraling down into not being a superpower is just going to go vastly quicker. I mean, I don't think like the Americans are well set up to defend Taiwan at all. China has more warships than the Americans do, for example. On the
Yeah, their stuff's pretty crap though.
Yeah.
well, no, most of their warships are not bad. Where we have a decisive advantage is in submarines, but it's only in submarines.
But China still hasn't got a blue sea navy, have they?
No, but they don't need a blue sea navy to take Taiwan. You're absolutely right. Like the Royal Navy and the Americans can operate anywhere in the world because they have the support ships and all that stuff. That's why the Royal Navy was able to operate a carrier task group in the South China Sea last year that my son was on. But the Chinese can't do that. They can't put a carrier task group in the Atlantic, but they don't want to at the moment.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. I think the Americans can't afford to not defend Taiwan, but I don't think anything's going to happen in Ukraine. Is a little higher. If Russia decides to invade Ukraine, they'll invade Ukraine. No one's going to do anything. I mean, I heard that Alexander Johnson was going to call Putin. Well, good luck. And go and visit Ukraine. Well, good luck. I mean, maybe he'll get bombed, which wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. Although, actually, I think like at the moment.
Well, I mean, this is kind of, but doesn't this also spill onto Taiwan? I mean, weakness shown by the West on the Taiwan on the Ukraine issue will spill over into how China approaches the Taiwan situation.
No,
and the Ukraine situation is kind of a lose-lose for us because if it's all hot air, we look stupid. If it turns out to be something and we can't defend it, which we can't, then we look weak. So
no one, as far as I'm aware, has said that like if Putin invades Ukraine, there's going to be American or British soldiers there. I don't think anyone said that. I don't think anyone's been that moronic.
Well, when I say we can't defend it, I mean can't and won't. I mean, if we choose, even though we all agree we probably don't care who rules Ukraine, as far as the elites are concerned, they do. And if they can't or won't defend it for a bunch of logistical and other reasons, China is going to see that as a sign of weakness, ultimately.
Well, they'd be foolish if they did that because, like, to defend Ukraine, you need land forces. Whereas to defend Taiwan, you need naval and air forces.
Yeah, but it's also about political will, isn't it? And that's what's really being tested here.
I see what you're saying, but like the West doesn't have the logistic support to put serious land forces in the Ukraine. It's just not possible. Look where it is in the world.
Mm.
It's not possible to do that, but it's
Yeah.
quite easy for Western forces to put very serious naval and air forces to defending Taiwan. And
yeah, and I'm sure there's some good admirals somewhere that have drawn up some very comprehensive plans, but they're ultimately going to have their hands tied by weak politicians, and China will know this.
Maybe. 1 second, guys. I've just got to go and do something. I'll be back in a sec.
I mean, I think if I'm not going to be black-pilled here, but what is the West? I mean, at this point, what's the West? I mean,
Well, yeah,
what's the
it's
point of the
literally
West?
just a loosely tied collection
Yeah.
of global homo elites at this point.
Exactly. So I'm like, if there's no such thing as the West, I mean, a political West, I mean, aside from NATO, but NATO is just a Spurgfest at the moment. What's the point? I mean,
Well, yeah, but it's just you don't want British people, or literally anyone else in the West to just become a serf class under a Chinese run technocracy. So, and
yeah, sure.
China and Taiwan is really just the starting ground for their attempt at a global ambition. If they can get
Sure.
that far, I don't know.
No, I can agree with the Taiwan one. I mean, even though the Taiwan government's quite homo. I mean, yeah, sure, it is what it is. We've got to defend ourselves against communists, but Russia, I mean, it's not a fight, to be honest. I mean, is Ukraine even a country?
Well, I mean, the thing is as
yeah.
well, like I mean, our leaders have made themselves look weak on this subject anyway. I mean, the thing to do if you were actually a based Boris, which doesn't exist, is to just point at a map and say, well, look, we've had Russia encroached on all sides for years. If they want to take back one little block on the board, that's up to them.
Yeah, I mean, matter of fact, I mean, the current Russian political ambition with Ukraine is that Ukraine is Ukraine is part of Russia. It's Slavic land. I mean, there's no such thing as Ukrainian people. They are Russian people. I mean, if you look at that perspective, look at Spain and Catalonia in the Basque Country. Look at the United Kingdom with Scotland, their independence. I'm sure in the future, when these autonomous regions start having sort of a paramilitary fight, I'm sure they'll be using the reasons of Russia. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
100%. So I mean, I kind of doubt anything will kick off in Ukraine. I don't know.
I reckon there might be a little skirmish. That's it. But
Yeah.
if it does get pushed into Kiev, I can just see Boris Johnson trying to do a Winston, I guess, just trying to have just a little fun, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this would be because I mean he often talked about his various high-end political ambitions. I think his sister used to talk about it a lot as well, and none of that ever materialized. So I hope it doesn't suddenly come out in his sort of neocon side.
No, I could see that. I mean, his legacy is on the line as well, especially the whole
Yeah.
lockdown thing. You would ought to at least show, right, I was the big hero at Ukraine. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Sorry, guys. My neighbor wanted me to help her do something with her car. I don't know. I think the situation in Ukraine is totally different from Taiwan. There's an old saying that like military professionals look at logistics and amateurs look at tactics. And it's true to the extent that you can't fight without supplies. You can't fight without ammunition and water and food and all this other stuff. And like, there's no way the West can do that in Ukraine, but they certainly can do that around Taiwan. And I think that's the enormous difference.
Yeah.
And Max Ernest says it will be a test of NATO. I don't think so, to be honest. I don't even like half of the problem is that NATO has continually lied. They've said to the Russians, we won't allow this nation or this nation or this nation to join NATO. but they've kept allowing them to do so. And I'm not a big Putin fan. Don't get me wrong. I'm not one of these people who thinks that Putin is absolutely based and good. He ain't. He ain't. But he's looking at Russia, and if I was the leader of Russia, I really wouldn't want the Baltic states to be in NATO. I wouldn't want Ukraine to be in NATO, because if the Russians hadn't already taken over Crimea, for example, and quite a lot of other areas that are full of Russian expats in what used to be Ukraine, Russia's getting increasingly surrounded. I kind of get where he's coming from. And what are we gaining from this? Particularly when, like, Germany and France, for example, particularly in relation to their ridiculous watermelon green so-called renewable energy policies, are increasingly absolutely dependent on Russian gas. It's nonsense. And I just don't get the point. I don't understand the point at all. I don't care who runs Ukraine. I'm not sure why any of us should care who runs Ukraine. Are we supposed to be here because we're thinking about what's morally good for the world? Well, I don't know what's morally good for Ukraine, and I don't frankly care. Like, yeah, as I said, the only reason I would support Taiwan is not because I like the Taiwanese government. I don't. And Limbu quite rightly pointed out they're very liberal, and I don't like that. The reason I'd support Taiwan is because if the Chinese Communist Party takes Taiwan, their next objective is going to be Japan, and followed by that, alongside that, Australia. That's just the fact. Like, it's not because there's some moral reason I care about Taiwan. It's two things. It's A, we can do something about Taiwan, which we can't about Ukraine, and B, I much more care about Australia and to a slightly lesser degree Japan than I do about Ukraine. And by the way, and I'm not saying Australia because I live here, by the way. I'd say.
Oh, he left. Oh. I think his Wi-Fi went down. Poor chap.
Oh.
He was mid rant as well. Shame. It's all about Australia.
Yeah. I don't know. Is he coming back?
Yeah, I think he might. I think he's having one of his laptop problems.
Yeah. Ranting too hard.
Yeah. I think
Anyway,
the Australian government was like overhearing it and saying, "Nah, we're not allowing this."
Like, shut it down! Shut it down! Oh, here he is.
Returned. It's the usual thing. If I even vaguely touch my microphone jack, I get disconnected. I have no idea why.
It was the Russian government. If you couldn't tell, definitely not.
Nah, it wouldn't have been the Russians. I was kind of saying we should leave that shit alone. Might have been the Chinese Communist Party.
So
yeah,
are we going to call it there, or
unless either of you guys have any final thoughts? I think probably we will. I'll play us out of a tune as I always do.
Yeah,
I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good. Everything's all good.
No worries, guys. Okay, well, just to let people know, I've been threatening a John Charnley Splendid Isolation British Foreign Policy 1874-1914 stream for many months now, and increasing numbers of people have asked me when I'm going to do it, and I think we're going to do it on February the 9th or 10th, which is to say Wednesday or Thursday, so not next week, the week after, because by that stage at least 3 or 4 of us will have finished the book, and we can talk about it. And for anyone who doesn't realize, in my opinion, Britain doing the Entente with first France and then Russia in the early 1900s, after the Liberal Party won the 1908 election and Churchill crossed the floor from the Conservatives to the Liberals because he was an idiot and had no sense, was the original sin of Britain and the Empire. So, there we go. And on that note, I am. Don't forget, by the way, also to subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell thing so you get notifications and all that other bullshit. And on that note, I'll play us out with a tune. Oh, for God's sake, don't tell me I've lost it.
That's very quiet.
Quiet.
Oh, okay. There we go.
Oh dear.
Oh, he's dropped again.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, this is going to be the
British
eternal
lady.
stream.
The jamming of the Russians and the communists. They're doing Duke well, aren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, you can't
Paymasters
just-
have been on the phone to the Australian Prime Minister.
Yeah. I think Scott Morrison's calling Duke right now on a very particular matter. Yeah. We can't end the stream, that's the problem, so.
No, here
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah, all right.
Bless.
So yeah, sorry about that. Like I said, if I even slightly touch the jack to my microphone, it's buggered. Anyway, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week. And thank you to my guests for joining us.
No worries.
No worries.
See you
Have a
next
good
week.
time.